Well, hello there.
Well, hello there, sir. It's been what, almost a year at this point? What
Can
took
you
us so long?
can you just tell me three bands that you've been listening to lately? Just three. No, just kidding.
I mean, if you want me to, I can. I can throw it. I can throw it out like that. I'm used to having people, have that thrown at them and be like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on," and now you're gonna put me on the spot. Jeez, at
Well,
least give me.
I've heard you do that in so many episodes that I just figured, do an imitation of you.
It's like, give me three bands artists that you love to see more, get more support right now. I'm like, shoot, who do I actually say at this moment? I mean, I could probably rattle off 10 if I just wanted to rip right
I,
now.
I can only imagine if you took the list of all your guests and all the three bands that they've named, you would have about 33,000 bands to pick from.
Maybe if I actually had to, well, if I actually had to give a good calculation of it, because I got an idea. Because when I started doing that, that would have been like September of 2023 when I started asking that question, and it would be about 150 episodes ago. So take 150 times three on average, we're about 450 suggestions in a little under a year and a half.
So, do you ever get suggestions of bands that you don't know, and then you go and listen to them and you go, "Oh my God, this band fucking rules."
All the time, man, all the
Is
time.
it always hardcore and metal that they hit you with?
Not always. I've had some people come up with country artists. My buddy Joey Arena gave me like five or six synthwave artists that he was into that he wanted people to check out. So I can always take it from all different aspects. Of course, the majority of it is within rock and metal or anything in a heavier music spectrum. But there are times people say, "Can we go in a different direction?" I'm like, "Hey, I asked you what you're listening to. That's what I want to hear. So let me hear it. I want to hear it because you never know what you're going to get into. And how are these other artists going to get known if we don't start speaking about them?"
I don't do it the way you do it, but I always, so often I ask people, what do you even listen to? I don't ask them to give me three because I don't want to steal Kevin's ideas. Although I may have
If,
stole a few here and there, to be honest with you.
if you've taken a few here and there, we'll say you didn't steal ideas. We'll say you were inspired by them.
There you go. You do inspire me, man. You do an excellent job. And I don't get to see every episode, but whenever I tune in, I see a lot of your highlights that you post.
I've been doing that a lot more this year. And then one thing I started changing up, I think they changed this up around, I want to say October. I started doing this because I had a band called The Fail Safe on. It was their second
Yeah.
time ever on the podcast this year. And we were talking about something after recording, and they had brought up on how a couple of their shorts had gotten a lot more popular because they used some sort of AI software that would break it up for them. And I'm like, well, I watch these episodes all the time over and over again, and I end up finding those spots so I can break them up myself like I used to in the vertical format. But the thing that always kept me going away from was the subtitles. A lot of people watch those shorts without volume, and those subtitles can be a huge thing. I used to do it, but
Hmm.
a video itself would take me anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes to subtitle myself. Now, again, I'm still a one man show here, so that took me a long time, but
Me
I
too.
found some AI software. I put the video in there. It's like under a minute in a vertical format, and it'll give me the subtitles for it.
Oh,
But
I might
I'll
have to
still
pick
go,
your brain about that because I've been doing my own clips and everything. It's a lot of work, man. I just put an episode out recently and I put 20 clips from different shows. I'm on GarageBand for like 3 hours editing that thing, man. It's not easy. People have no idea all the work that goes into it.
yeah, there was, yeah, there. If I wanted to do this, if I was gonna take like, because there was one weekend, I decided to do this. I had a whole bunch of episodes I recorded just because I started batching them together because the opportunities were there to interview these bands. I wasn't gonna say no to it if I wanted to interview them. So I had like a backlog of like 11 bands of worth of episodes or 11 episodes worth of content, and I'll usually make three short videos per, so that's 33 short videos. Now I do what I normally do, but then to put the subtitles on them, if I did it the old way, 33 times, a half hour, that's about 16 and a half hours
It's
worth
a
of
lot.
work right
It's time consuming, man. I remember when I
there.
put my best of show together, the first one, it took me like hours
Yeah.
just to
When
edit
I
all those clips.
when I did the AI version of the subtitles, 'cause I put it in there, AI gave me the subtitles. They weren't always correct, but before I burnt the subtitles on there and got the video file, I could go in and edit them. So I still watched over them to make sure that they were spelled right, everything looked good. Each video took me at the most 6 minutes. So,
I gotta start using more AI, I guess.
and it's not using it to like change your creativity. It's basically we're using it to take some of those administrative tasks out of the fold.
Yeah, it helps enhance the whole thing too. So, I got in touch with you because I know that you know what's happening when it comes to the hardcore and metal, and I wanted to talk to you about some of your highlights for 2024, and you sent me a list. I knew a bunch of there's some really interesting things on here that we could talk about as we go along, but why don't you start, because I like the order that you put it in. Hardcore, and I like the titles you gave: hardcore into the mainstream. Talk about some of these bands that you picked in 2024, and what made you pick them. I know you're going to start off with the Kentucky band Knocked Loose, because I can tell that you like them.
I have to start with the Kentucky band Knocked Loose. Not only was their album this year, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to, a top album of the year for many major publications, but many people that are also into this stuff as well. That was their favorite album of the year. I'm a part of that as well. I love the album. I've been listening to it consistently since it came out in May. I've seen Knocked Loose twice live since then, and when I got to see him here in Milwaukee, that was like my 50th show of the year, and it was just an absolute bonkers fun time. More people doing, like, the pit was huge, more people at hardcore dancing and everything. But the reason why I want to start with Knock Loose is I was thinking about this a couple days ago. And it seems like every year there's always, like, especially in not only the rock and metal scene, but a little bit more the mainstream side as well, a band that ends up breaking out and becoming a lot bigger than they were, or becoming a lot more known than they even were. And I was trying to figure out which band does that fit in for every single year. And when it came to 2024, yes, a lot of people knew who Knocked Loose was, especially in more of the hardcore scene, maybe some of the metal scene, but they became so much more well known and so much more well regarded, not only in that scene, but also in pop culture as well with the release of that album. So many more people were focusing in on putting their little clips in for TikTok, just having fun with that, which grew the band exponentially. I remember seeing them this was 2022, first time I saw them, they headlined a room with Kubla Khan and Movements, and it was maybe about a room that fit, I want to say at the most 1,200 people. So it's just still it's insane for a hardcore band, because hardcore's always been seen as lower in the echelon of the mainstream, where we knew about it, everyone knows that it's there, but those bands never really get past that like club level of maybe 300-400 people at the most. Now you're starting to see it with Knocked Loose. They go on tour with Motionless in White in 2023. They were direct support for them, but more people were in for Knocked Loose than anybody else during that tour, because I'd seen that before. Now in 2024, they release You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. They do a headlining run, and they're playing large venues. I saw them in Chicago play a venue that holds max 3,500 people, and they were the headliners. Then after the album comes out, they're doing a fall headline run. They play in Chicago once again, and they're playing at a venue that holds 4,500 people,
Yeah.
and it sells out. They played here in Milwaukee at the Eagles Ballroom at the Rave, probably about 4,000 people. That sold out as well. So they just kept building. They just kept going. And it all basically culminated in, was this a huge hit in the mainstream? Two things. One, their collaboration, or their song that had Poppy featured on it called Suffocate, really hit it big. But then they got a spot playing 5-6 songs on Jimmy Kimmel.
Sorry.
Now, what band is, I mean, I know there have been other like late night hosts that have propped up like heavier artists, especially Conan O'Brien, but Jimmy Kimmel's kind of the only one that might dip his toes in there now and again. Bringing on Knocked Loose, who would have thought that would have happened?
Well, I know. I know you brought this up in a couple. I was going to bring Poppy up because I'm familiar with her because yes, I am a WWE fan. I don't watch all the time, but I know that she's contributed a ton of songs to NXT, which is one of the I don't know if you're a wrestling fan at all, but she's from Boston originally. So I know who she is, and that song Suffocate, when I watched the clip of them doing it on Jimmy Kimmel, and first of all, I was thinking, wait a second, this can't really be really happening here. Why would he have a hardcore band on his show? And there was a pit and everything. It was
Yeah.
unreal, man. Unreal.
It was absolutely insane. And before I go off on that, I'm not the biggest WWE fan, but I do believe in Joe Hendry.
Well, no, I like it from the entertainment value, I've been since I'm a little kid. I don't, watch regularly, but I knew about Poppy. But the video too for Suffocate is excellent too. That was a great band to put at the top because I knew that they were a rising band. And just saying into the mainstream the way you
Yeah.
worded it, you can't get more mainstream than Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, that's amazing. That's a good
Well,
place for you to
well, not
start.
only that, but I mean, Suffocate with Knockles and Poppy is nominated for a Grammy this year.
That's incredible.
A hardcore band got a Grammy nomination, and will they win? I've got a feeling like it's not going to happen, but just the fact that they got a Grammy nomination speaks volumes. But beyond that, we're seeing more and more bands that have those hardcore elements into them release music in 2024 that really did rise up, including bands like Alpha Wolf. They've got a little bit more of that metalcore, hardcore mix between them. But I still remember seeing them in 2022 here in Milwaukee. They played a venue that maybe held at the most, if you could pack them in there, 200 people. They released their album Half Living Things this year back in April. I had their frontman Lochi on the podcast. Fun guy to interview
You
too.
did. Yeah, for
Yeah.
people that don't know, this is an Australian band, which makes it even more interesting to
Oh
me.
yeah. Well,
Because
Australian bands are absolutely nuts with anything in the heavy music scene. It's like every time you hear a band, it's like, where are they from? Australia? Yep, you know it's going to be good in some kind of quality, either good or really good. It's only in between those two
yeah,
options.
Bon Scott and AC/DC started the whole thing for Australia, and Emil and the Sniffers is broken out too. And the Vinyls, they're not really heavy, but there's been a lot of great bands from Australia, and this band's really interesting.
Yeah, and because they ended up coming to the U.S., they did a headlining run, and they ended up selling out a lot of the venues that they went. It was only maybe like a 700, 800 cap rooms that they ended up selling out, but that's a lot more than 200 people, and they came by in a headlining run their first time around. And people are getting to know them even more. They did another collaboration too that a lot of people were interested in a song called "Sucks to Suck," and it featured none other than Ice-T.
What
Now,
an
now, now,
another great video. I've seen that video many times. Ice-T. What a score. I know my friend Mike Gitter at Century Media works with Ice-T, and I'm sure he had something to do with that collaboration. But the video, the song and the video, definitely, in my opinion, one of the best songs of the year in this genre.
I'll say if anyone wants to go check it out, because in my interview with Lochi on the Chord Progression Podcast, I did ask him about how this came to be and what they did with Ice-T. And they're like, we couldn't tell Ice-T what to say. Like, it's Ice-T. We gave him the song we told him was about, and he just wrote it in like a half hour, and that's what he gave us. And we're like, yeah, we don't want anything else besides that. However, Ice-T wasn't their first pick for this. They had somebody else set up for it, but they ended up having to back out for some reason. And they wouldn't tell me who it was. And I've been
Ooh,
listening to the song to see
interesting.
if they can pick up a certain like little Easter egg or clue of
Hmm.
who it might have been. But I think it was originally supposed to be RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan.
Oh, now, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the video is the one where the kid gets beat up at the beginning and he turns into a creature, right? Am I get the right
I,
video here?
I don't no, I don't think that's it because I know most of the video is them in like a high school
Yeah,
type
yeah,
setting.
that's
I
where it
can't,
starts. It's in
but
a
if it
high
starts like
school.
that,
He's
I'm gonna
got the
take your word for it, man, because I haven't
Yeah,
watched the
yeah,
video in a
I
while.
did. I did watch it recently too. He's got the glasses on, the broken glasses and stuff. It's a great video. I know that's Ice-T actually isn't. He's on a TV screen. He's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he went there and shot a video with them, but still, great collaboration.
So
Definitely.
I won't be surprised if you had during some time in 2025 Alpha Wolf and Body Count on one of those Danny Wimmer Presents Festival lineups, and Ice-T comes out and does that with Alpha Wolf live.
That
I
would be
would not be
great.
surprised.
That'd be great for those guys, man. Like I love to see young bands get, blow up like that because a veteran comes and helps them out, because it's been like that. It's always been that way, but to see him do a video with them, I thought was great.
Yeah, and
What
when it
else?
comes, especially when it comes to heavier music, when you see you see some rappers coming over and doing something like that. There's a couple of rappers that could always jump over to a rock and metal side, and not only would fans absolutely embrace them because they know they're also kind of a part of it, but they know the quality that it comes through. Ice-T is one of them. Anytime you hear a rock or metal artist do a collaboration with Tech Nine, that also always hits. If anyone want to do a collaboration with 3 6 Mafia or Cypress Hill, absolutely people would be all for it.
We've got the encyclopedia of heavy rock today on the show. I mean, I'll admit there's a couple bands you mentioned that I didn't know. So I know Kubla Khan, and I think you're going to go with them next, right?
Yeah, I was gonna go with Kubla Khan next because they released an album back in September, and they ended up doing a headlining run too, just like the same time Alpha Wolf did their headlining run back in like spring, it was around April, and they ended up headlining, and they ended up having a very similar reaction and similar crowd size to what Alpha Wolf had, which again is continuing to grow, continuing to rise. They ended up, I believe, if I'm correct, they did a support run alongside a sold out Lorna Shore tour. So now you're getting in front of, thousands of people at that point in time. And people are all in for it. People are all into it. I know there was some sort of little like intricate, like, little spat online around the election time because of political affiliations, whatever it might be. But Kubla Khan not only puts on one hell of a show, but they are absolutely in that form of where Knock Loose is, trying to like coming up, not to the level that Knock Loose got to, but they're definitely in that same kind of level where Alpha Wolf is at the moment, and it's continuing to go up there. But the newcomer in all of this is a band from some in the Scandinavia area called Throne. I believe they're from Sweden. They released their album Excessive Force or Excessive Guilt. I can't remember
Yeah,
the name of it off the
Excessive
top of my
Guilt.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's only like 19, 20 minutes long. It's not
I
long at all.
love it.
But
I love it.
but it is hard hitting. It is nuts, and a lot of people got behind it as like that non-US hardcore band of a brand new thing that people were just absolutely all for. I know they toured I think it was the first time in the US back in May with, I think, Spite they toured with. And now, okay, where are they going into 2025? They're coming over to the US in February and March, headlining. Now, the shows aren't as
Fantastic.
big as some of these other shows, like they're not going to be as big as Knock Loose, but they're headlining, and their venues, like people, they're selling out, and they're having to upgrade venues just because there's still so much demand for tickets that they need to change venues to accommodate more people. I've seen that happen before with a couple of other artists, and every time you see that happen, you have to smile at that because you're seeing more and more of these intense bands, these heavier bands start to grow, start to get in the mainstream, not only in with where Knock Loose is, but heavier bands are getting more connected with heavy music fans in general. They're not being secular to a specific section of that scene where it's only hardcore fans and that's it. You're seeing a lot more fans that just enjoy heavy music getting into this stuff. Knock Loose being a huge proponent of that absolutely helps get a lot more people, not only from the mainstream into heavy music, but heavy music fans into more of this hardcore stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing more collaborations between other bands, other artists, and these tours are starting to get even wackier in terms of who's on what. But it brings so many great fans together. It brings so many great people together, and it allows these genres that people have loved for so many years to start to get the recognition that they deserve to get from a much larger audience.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I think Throne is a great name, and I can't believe no one's ever used it before. Because for a hardcore or a punk band, Throne is a fantastic name. You also had Counterparts on your list.
Yeah, Counterparts end up releasing a surprise EP. I want to say it was in November. Like, it came out of nowhere, and I was a little disappointed when I first heard about it because I got the press release for it, and I was like, I would have loved to have interviewed Counterparts. It'd have been great, but the EP was a surprise drop, so
Yeah.
the announcement that they were coming out with something was the release announcement. Listening through it, I mean, it's 6 songs. It's not that long either. It's more of a hardcore thing. It might honestly be as long as the Throne album is with 4 less tracks on it, but it shows that bands that have been around for quite some time can continue to build up on this and continue to show more of the greatness that's there. So not only are we seeing newer bands that are in this genre or a little bit, not necessarily, some of the older bands that are around that people have known about for many years start to come up, but you're seeing the ones that have been around for a while begin to come up again and get more notice. And then the other one I put on there for the list is a band called Boundaries. They released an album back in March. Again, it's more of that metalcore, hardcore mix, but it's something where a lot of people that love heavy music, immediately once the album dropped, this thing went on Album of the Year lists almost immediately. And it was pretty cool to see that happen. I know Alan Harrington on Twitter, he's a huge metalcore guy, huge heavy music guy, always is the person you want to follow on Twitter. X, whatever you want to call it, because every Friday he releases a list of the new releases, whether it's albums, EPs, singles, and it can be like 5 or 6 like Twitter threads long or tweets
That's a
long.
good
It's
tip.
insane.
It's a good tip. I want to comment on something you said a few minutes ago
Yeah.
about the shorter songs. Back in the early days, the original hardcore scene, which you weren't born for, and I'm not rubbing that in or anything, there were a lot of bands that had songs under a minute. You'd listen to a record and there'd be like 10 songs, 11 minutes. You know, seriously, it was a real thing back then, you know? I think they did it to just be spiteful, because, the old school is you got to have a 3 minute song and it can't be longer than 3 minutes to get on the radio, and these bands don't give a shit about radio, obviously.
No, the heavy bands don't give a shit about radio at all because, especially the hardcore ones, because no radio is going to pick them up. Like,
Yeah.
who's going to pick from Knock Loose? What radio station is going to willingly pick up Brian Garris's vocals and support it without a massive outcry from the general public or from fans alike? Looking at Throne again, I wanted to pull up their album. Their first song on the album, the first track is called Guilt. I love that song. 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Now,
That's long.
but that's their longest song. Their shortest song is a song called Ignored, and it is exactly 1 minute long. Otherwise, we're looking at 2 minutes, 2:14, 1:54, 2:02, 1:30, 2:03, 1:57, 1:30, and 2 minutes.
They could
For a
do
total- yeah.
they could do all videos on YouTube, shorts, all shorts.
They easily could. They could do like a quick little short video of literally a music video. They could put out 30 seconds of it and it would absolutely hit. That requires a lot of work and a lot of effort, but especially with some of these moments that are in some of these songs because they're quick and they hit, it's given the prominence of TikTok and how that short form content works, they could absolutely be a huge player in that for 2025 if they wanted to go that route.
Yeah. You want to go to the heavy metal scene now, or do you want to talk about these You already hit on a couple collaborations. There was one other collab you had.
Yeah, so I did hit on a couple of collaborations. I hit on Knock Loose and Poppy, Elf
Yeah.
Wolf and Ice-T because those really grew. But we're seeing a lot more of these bands, like I said, and other artists from different genres, different styles, collaborating together just to come up with something
In every genre, really, it's happening now. It's collaborations are the thing, man. They
And I
said
think
that was going to be a new trend. Sorry, they said that was going to be a new trend like a few years ago. Guess what? It's happening in every genre now. It's a good thing.
Before I jump into it, it's a great thing, and I wanted to maybe talk about that too, because why I think they said that, maybe a couple of years ago was when going back to the pandemic, when all those shutdowns happened and people were just kind of stuck in
You're
their
right.
houses and trying to create, just that was their only outlet. I mean, everyone
point.
was trying to do that. So the freedom to try and do some of these things or maybe think about these ideas absolutely worked. And when it came to maybe, okay, when it comes to money, when it comes to record labels, how is this going to happen? They wanted to get anything out there that they could at that time. So collaborations end up being a very popular
It's
thing.
a good point.
But,
That's a very good point. The pandemic definitely increased that. You're right.
yeah. But then going forward, everyone saw that not only was this a great idea, but the other side of it was you had seen so many other genres and so many other creatives start to come out online and on these online spaces, especially on TikTok. So weaving some of these things together and blending all these different genres, whether it's one artist doing it themselves or in a collaboration effort with another artist, it showed that it could absolutely work and be a huge thing, whether if it's just one little piece of the song that gets big on TikTok or if it's something that the whole song itself stands out. And that's why there's that one other collaboration I put on the list for you that I didn't mention yet, and I will now.
You love baby metal.
By Baby Metal and Electric Callboy. I do love Baby Metal.
You love them.
I can't help it. They're fantastic to watch live. They're so much fun to go and see. They're fun to listen to. And I know a lot of people also are still like, oh, it's not fully metal. I'm like, you listen to the backing and it's heavy. You listen to what they're saying. It's like, it's just fun to be there. If you're listening to heavy music and it puts a smile on your face, come on, how is that something that's going to be bad? That's Baby Metal 100% of the way. You listen to them and you can't help but be like, I can't help but enjoy this, man. This is too fun.
You can't be too picky anymore about what's too heavy and what's not heavy because there's so much crossover happening. It's ridiculous that people would look at it that way. I know you got the hardcore people, I don't mean hardcore music, but I mean hardcore fans are like, that does not sound like it's supposed to, It's Fuck that.
Those are the fans that are in 20 years. Yes, I'm saying 20 years. They'll be like, "You darn kids, get off my property."
So talk about some of your heavier. You got the emergence into the heavy scene. You got,
Yeah.
wait, did we do that already? Oh no,
No,
you
we
have
did not do.
Throne. Wait a minute. Did you list Throne twice on here? You
I
might
did
have.
list Throne twice because what I wanted to do with my when I gave you the emergence into the heavy scene, what I did for that was I wanted to pick bands that not maybe especially for the heavier scene or maybe anything with heavier music, either not that many people knew about or people should know about and have started to get a lot more connection and prominence in 2024.
So
And because
are they, sorry to interrupt, are they more hardcore or metal as far as you're concerned, as far as their fan base goes?
when it comes to Throne, easy hardcore.
Okay.
Yeah, but I want to put them on there, especially because their album, that was the first, that was their debut album.
You got to
So,
understand, for someone like me, there's a fine line these days about what's
yeah.
hardcore and what's metal. Because I remember way back in the mid 80s, all these hardcore bands like SSD, The Freeze, DYS, Black Flag, they all started sounding like metal bands. They crossed over from hardcore to metal. So it's funny how things just, history repeats itself. That's what's happening. History is repeating itself 40 years later.
Not as, I mean, it's repeating itself too, but it's also similar to fashion, where fashion is always it's like it's cyclical, where there's things that'll go out of style and there's things that'll come back into style, and it gets recycled over and over again. And it's same thing with music, especially we're talking about hardcore, where 40 years ago there were a lot of bands that were really into that stuff and it really hit. But as time went on, maybe those bands decided to change and the times around them decided to change. So when people were listening to it, they weren't connecting with that heaviness as much, so they went in a different direction, and that style of heaviness and hardcore really didn't get to come back until I mean, Knocked Loose had been around since around 2015, 2016. People started to know about them when they released Counting Worms in 2016 with the Arf Arf breakdown. But when the pandemic hits and when there's a lot of political unrest all over the world, and here in the US in 2020, we had a lot of different political changes that happened during that time. There's a lot of pent up aggression, a lot of pent up anger. And a good way people can release that without potentially resorting to something that's very damaging is listening to music that ends up,
Go in the
allowing
pit with
things to come
Kevin.
out. Yeah, or go in the pit with people. What the fuck happens? Let's have some fun. I mean, we'll see how many more years I have of being in the pit, as I just turned 30 at the end of 2024.
Oh no. Hey, I went to a show last when was it, last summer? The Circle Jerks, 7 Seconds, and Negative Approach. All of those bands are like in their close to 60, if not 60. And there were a lot of old guys in that huge pit at the Hard Rock in Boston. I mean, it was like ooh. I'm like, there's no way I would go down there, but I saw some older people in there, and I was like, they're crazy.
The question for me is, can I do it as long as I like to do it, which is I got to be in there every song for every band that's on the bill and give it my all, because if I'm not doing that, then it's like it's not worth it. And I think in 2024 I hit 50. My total count for shows was 53.
You're hardcore, man. You're
So
hardcore. You know what I
I
wanted
got
to say? When I listed those bands before, there were two bands that were in my head: Corrosion of Conformity and
ooh.
DRI, COC and DRI. Those bands were really fast, hardcore bands that became metal bands. You can hear the progression. You can hear the chord progression in their music.
He said it. He said it. But again, that's the beauty of music. As time goes on, if a band makes the same sound over and over and over again, very rarely are fans going to just latch onto that and be like, this is the perfect thing, we don't want them to change. You're going to get fans that are going to be, hoping that bands ever change. But as time goes on,
Sellout. They
people
start, some people
mindset.
like they sold out. I'm like, they're changing their music. They're not selling out.
Maybe their taste changed. Maybe their mindsets change, because as time goes on, your mindset at 20 is not the same mindset you have at 30, or the same mindset you have at 40. Times change, responsibilities change, what you care about changes. So the music that you want to make is going to reflect the emotions that you're feeling at that
Yeah.
time, and what you want to create, it's going to be that inspiration point that's going to change.
You had a couple bands here I didn't really know. 156 slash Silence. Is that one band or two bands? I don't,
That
I
is, that,
didn't.
That is one band. They're called 156 Silence. Yes, I know the slash is in there, but I put the slash in there because that is actually in their name.
So I don't know anything about them. You stumped me with that band. I didn't have time to look them up, but who are they and where are they from?
They're a metalcore band from here in the United States. Right before their album in 2024 called People Watching came out, I actually got to interview their vocalist. His name's Jack. Very fun guy to talk to. And we talked all about this album, and it was just him trying to do a lot more different things with his voice and not only amplifying the thicker, unclean vocals, but also bringing some clean vocals to light as well to just maximize out on what 156 Silence could do. When the album came out, I think it was maybe in the first month or so, it didn't get as much traction as you thought it would. And this album came out in September of 2024. All of a sudden, it was people just started picking up on it. People really
Was that their
listened
first
to it.
album?
No, I believe it's their third, I want to
Yeah, I gotta
say.
check them out. I'm not familiar with them.
And it just like people recognize the intricacies and the beauty that was in this guy's voice and how the band ended up being able to play off of such a more expanded sound that still stayed heavy and true to what the core 156 Silent sound was prior to this release.
So
So
there's
many,
like the death vocals and the clean vocal.
yeah, they added a little more clean
Yeah, I
vocals.
like bands like that. Draconian is one of my favorite bands that does that. They're like Swedish, I think, Swedish band.
Yeah, so it kept going, and I just kept seeing more people get into it, get behind this band, and it was just something that a lot of heavy fans were hoping for, especially more of those like stricter, more I would not say like curmudgeon-y, but more just very stoic heavy fans that like the same kind of thing is they don't like to hear a lot of times, you have clean vocals come in. They only like the unclean side of things. But with what 156 Sounds did, a lot of those fans were taking a lot more to it because as they saw it, I think they felt like they did it right. And a lot
Right.
of fans that still like, that some of those, the flip-flop every now and again, they still felt like 156 did it the best way possible.
Where are they from in America?
Shoot, I should know this because I literally interviewed
That's
them, but
okay. Well, that's okay. We can find out later.
oh,
It's not a big
I'm
deal.
oh, I should be able to find it pretty quickly. At least I hope I can because I always write this stuff down, and I always
We have a different interview style because I always ask people at the beginning of my show where they're from. I do. It's just a different style, that's all. So that's
yeah,
why I'm always, well, where are they from?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
What?
Yep.
I did not know about them. I lived there for 5 years right up till 29, the end of 2019. I did not know about that band.
Yeah, they may
There's
have just started right around that time too, or right before that.
interesting.
So
Huh. I'm going to
the
definitely
movie,
check them out. If not for me,
if not for me, yeah. So they're a band from the like Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. They're more of that what we people would call like octane core. So like a lot of the heavier music you would hear on Sirius XM Octane, like heavy metal that's more radio friendly. That's
right.
more their style. They come out their second album this year, and I always like to give them. I always want to see them do well because ever since the band really became a thing, I had them on the podcast. This was back in I want to say 2021 or 2022. It was they were just signed to a small label called Theoria Records, and I am good friends with the guy that runs that label. His name's Cody, who actually now drums in If Not For Me. So I
Nice.
was really excited to see what we could get going with them. Then they ended up signing to In Vogue Records, and I got to interview them for that. Then all of a sudden, they're going to release their new album in 2024. They get upgraded from In Vogue to Thriller in under a year. And I'm like, okay, I got to talk to these guys again. They released their album this year, and a lot of people were really pleased with it because a lot of people that like that octane core formula, these guys absolutely hit on where the vocals from their frontman Patrick, very crisp, very clean. His uncleans aren't as forceful as a lot of these other guys are, but they're perfectly contrasting between his cleans and uncleans. So the progression of these songs just makes so much sense. They flow so well together. And they haven't really had like that huge headlining run yet. They've been doing a lot of support runs, but when they do these support runs, they end up working and playing alongside a lot of other great bands. Because I saw them, I know I saw them twice in 2024. For some reason, the first time I got to see them, they got a when this was back in May, they got a like 5 or 6 show run with Electric Callboy because Electric Callboy wanted them on their tour. because they heard
Nice.
him. They're like, we want this on this little like 5, 6 show run between Welcome to Rockville and Sonic Temple. So they jumped on it and they got in front of 4,000 people a night. Then in October they ended up on a tour with, it was Set It Off and From Ashes to New, which for them opening that show, perfect, because they're going to connect with a lot of fans that really like that sound. And now I know in 2025, if you're going to go see them live in, I believe it's February and March, they're going to be opening for Catch Your Breath. So you're going to get a lot of that same kind
So
of
they're
feel
in
and sound.
demand right now.
They're in demand. They're a great
Yeah.
band. And I always want to plug them too, not only because they're a good band, but because their lead singer, Patrick, I've always talked with him. He's always a good guy to talk to. Very nice guy. And of course, their drummer, Cody. The dude is a madman when it comes to trying to get so many smaller bands a lot more notice. And dude's a good drummer too. So, hey, Cody,
You
how's it
know
going,
what
buddy?
I love that. I love when bands help other bands, and it's just a good sign. It's good for the whole industry to see that happen. So I love to hear stories like that. Um, you got who
Yeah,
else you got here? Bill
I
Moore,
got Bill Murray on there.
Bill
Yep.
Murray, Bill Murray, Bill
Yep.
Murray, ladies and gentlemen, not Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray.
Not Dan Aykroyd, not Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, everyone's favorite comedian from the 1980s, whether you're watching Caddyshack, Stripes, or of course everyone's favorite Christmas movie of the 1980s, Scrooge. And yes, I am saying that over National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation because Scrooge is a hell of a lot better. But they came out with an album this year, I believe it was called American Motorsports. And if you want to talk about insane experimentation of sound, this is it. Like there's like they throw in country music in there, they throw a whole bunch of these different ideas in there, and it's something that honestly it shouldn't make sense, but that's what a lot of people are into these days. People are getting into the wackiness, into trying new things and seeing where some of these sounds can mix, because we had seen a lot of that happen in the past, but we haven't seen that happen at an absolute crazy scale or in an absolute, really overstepping the bounds of what people think can be
I like
creatively
bands
done.
that take
And that's what Bill Murray
chances.
does.
Yeah, I like bands that take chances and gamble, instead of being status quo.
If you stay
Um,
status quo, you're going to be stagnant the whole entire time, and you're never going to be able to step out and be those bands that are going to, maybe transcend to the next level. You think about all the great bands that you listed, or all the bands that, think about where Knocked Loose is right now. It's whatever sound they're creating. It's a little bit different from maybe that classic hardcore style or some of these other styles. But those bands that continue to innovate, change, and grow are the ones that are going to step out into the forefront. Electric Callboys did that in 2020 and continues to do that. Bad Omens is the perfect example from 2022.
yeah,
Deep Token in 2023, and Bring Me the Horizon pretty much ever since their existence.
the encyclopedia of heavy music. Okay, this next band on your list, so many people love them now. The Warning, they've really taken off. They're probably one of the more well-known bands that you have on your list. Am I correct saying that?
Yeah, you're definitely correct saying that, but the reason why I wanted to put them on there was because with their album in 2024 called Keep Me Fed, not they appeared on Jimmy Kimmel as well for the release of this album, so they got that nod as well. They're getting a lot more nods when it comes to festivals, not only here in America but overseas. You're seeing them go on more and bigger headlining runs. The reason I put them on there was because this is a band that I've been aware of since around 2020. And I've interviewed them twice, once in 2021, and I got to interview them right before the release of Keep Me Fed came out. I had like I interviewed them on a Tuesday. The album came out on that Friday, so
I
I had
watched
like
I watched one of your interviews with them. It was really good, really good.
and when it comes to rock music, now and this isn't just on the heavy side. I'm talking more about rock music. There's been a lot of stagnation in rock music for quite a while. I would definitely say for probably about the past 20 years, you turn on any rock radio station, you're not hearing really anything from any new bands that are coming up. You're hearing the same old stuff. Like the new bands you might be hearing from the past 20 years, like Hailstorm, maybe I can't remember who else I'd even put in there, but that'd pretty much be it. So there's a
True.
stagnation there, and when you see The Warning, you've got three sisters from Mexico who can absolutely rip a lot of great rock music. But
Incredible
with the
band.
album that came out in 2024, what they did was, that that's the word, and you have their core sound in there, especially in the way the choruses flow. But they wanted to play around with something intricate in every single song. It's a little bit different. Sometimes there's some funk, sometimes there's some blues, sometimes it gets a little bit more of that arena rock style. They did a whole song in Spanish as well, again, playing on their heritage and putting that out there. But everything sounded authentic, everything flowed together, and more people are getting to know them and getting to see them as not only a great band, but as the top band upcoming in rock music, and probably going to be the band that people see as the best band in rock music in the mainstream by the end of, I would say, the decade. And they're on that
Versatility.
way.
Yeah, versatility is the big word with that band for sure. They're
Oh,
very
yeah.
versatile,
Oh,
without a
absolutely
doubt.
versatile. That's something that you need to have. But the other thing that stands out with them too is they're young. Like
I know.
the, their sisters, they're in their like early 20s, and they're doing this.
They
This is a
it
band that's
seems like they've been around
been a
forever,
while.
man. They're just like they're making a huge impact.
Yeah, it seems like they've been around forever because a lot of people have known them for about 5, 6, 7 years. I know they kind of start to really get noticed when they did a cover of, I believe it was Enter Sandman,
Oh
and
yeah,
people
yeah.
got really picked up on it.
Yeah.
But this is when they were like teenagers, and now they're in their early 20s, mid 20s, and they're just continuing to grow every day, every year. So this is gonna be a band that when you think of maybe the recovery of rock music and brand new rock music
That's
going into like the 2030s,
a good
which
way
could
to
be a
put it.
major boom period for that genre, the Warning is going to be at the forefront of it.
Plus, I also think it's great that a band from Mexico is doing so well because when
Yes.
bands go to Mexico, every band I know that's ever gone down there, like, you wouldn't believe the crowds and the way people act. They're nuts. I went to a show once, Damn the Machine, Chris Poland's band. This is in the 90s. But I went down to Mexico with them and it was frantic the way the audience was acting, man. And they were a progressive metal band, but the kids were just going nuts. So
Yeah.
I like those Mexican audiences, and
I'll
it's
say
good.
to add to that, I recently did an episode with a band called Thrown into Exile, who their episode came out the day we recorded this too. But they told me about how their return show was in Tijuana, which made me think this makes no sense. But apparently, it's a huge black
Yeah,
metal scene in Tijuana. I was like, this makes no sense. I want to go to Tijuana to
yeah,
see a
that's
show.
where I saw that show, and that was in '94. So you can only imagine now. I mean, there's been a few punk bands I know that have told me they've been down there recently, and they've had successful shows as well. So the last band you have on this segment here, I love the song Primitive, Not Enough Space. They're a Florida band,
Yep.
and we were talking earlier about the heavy vocal and the clean vocal. There you go. This band, at least on the Primitive song that I heard, is really, they've got it down. Intense video, intense song. I'm sorry, I'm stealing your whole spot here.
Oh, you're not seeing my spot. You're doing just fine because you're talking about a band that you found out as well, and you like fell in love with not only the sound but also the style as well. I got to see them for the first time. This was middle of August. First time I ever heard about them because they had an opening spot in a show where Woe Is Me was headlining. My buddy Chris and I are in the crowd, and we see them go up on stage, and we see two front women up on stage. Now, of course, we're used to seeing dual frontmen. We're seeing a front woman up there. We're not used to seeing two front women. The last time I'd seen that really any kind of prominence was Butcher Babies. So we're curious to see how
Butcher
this is going to
Babe,
go.
good one. Good one.
After the first song, we were like, this band definitely has something because not only can both women do unclean and clean vocals, they can bounce off each other and the heaviness is there. And
Very heavy.
this is before they signed to Thriller in October, or was announced in October, and they released the song Primitive. If you listen to Primitive, it has that bounce back and forth. But the reason I put it on there was because there was a moment in Primitive in the breakdown where one of the front women, she moans during the breakdown.
Yeah.
And they put it online, they put it on TikTok and everything, and it just blew up. And then when
The
I got to
moan.
interview them, I actually asked them about the moan, and I put it in a little cut up short. I put it on Instagram. I checked it right before today, and I haven't done any promotion. I put it out like 2 weeks ago. It's been viewed 75,000 times. So I'm
What?
like, this band has something. Apparently, the
Wow.
algorithm likes them too. So when it comes to them coming into the heavy scene, for me, it felt like they came out of nowhere because I didn't even know about them in July. I had no idea who they were, any that they were a band, but now I'm like, I'm all in on them. The internet's getting to be all in on them. They're releasing a new album in 2025, and that's a band that I could easily see being one of those bands that we're talking about as one of the biggest breakout bands of 2025.
Yeah, and Central Florida, you could say what you want about Florida. Everyone has their opinions. There's always been a lot of good metal bands that have come from Central Florida, man. They continue to produce the metal bands, and there's another example of it right here.
Yeah, another example of it right there, and it's just gonna keep going. And yeah, like you said, you could say anything what you want about Florida and when it comes to the music they create, but my God, are there a lot of great bands that come from that
Yeah,
area?
absolutely. This last segment is great. I'm glad I didn't ask you to do this, but you did it. We already talked about Knock Loose on Jimmy Kimmel. I'm glad you put this in here, Lincoln Park, because I was going to ask you what you thought about this because I watched a full show on YouTube about a month ago, and I can't remember the new singer's name, but I thought I was really impressed. It's different, but it was impressive. What did you think?
So when they first announced that they were coming back and they were adding a front woman to the mix named Emily Armstrong, I wanted to
Yeah.
put her name in there to make sure that, we could cover that piece of it. I was definitely curious about it, I'm not gonna lie, because one, you're coming back, and the biggest thing that people are gonna hang on, and I was one of those people as well as Chester Bennington. We're all gonna hang on
You
his
can't
vocals.
replace him. You just can't
You can't
replace
do
him.
it. It's impossible to replace him, and that's why I'm glad they went with the front woman, because if they're going to come back and try and make music, by having her in there, you're going to actually have that strong differentiation between Chester and her. Like, there's not going to be a lot of crossover. Now, when it comes to the new music that they came out with releasing From Zero, a brand new album, there were a lot of people that got behind it, and a lot of people were pretty pleased with it. There's a lot of publications that put it at the top of their list. Wasn't at the top of my list because I had a lot of other bands that were at the top of my list as well for albums this year, like Knocked Loose, The Warning, In Heart's Wake, Alpha Wolf, Until I Wake, a band called One Morning Left. There's a lot of other bands that I liked more than what Linkin Park put out, but that's just on my own personal taste. When it came to her sound, though, on the new songs that they put out, I liked what they did because they didn't try to make her be Chester. They tried to let her be herself. So on the new songs, it stands out. But when I've seen videos of them performing live and performing, their other songs, it's for me, and I know for a lot of the fans, it's still hard to kind of get past that. That's not Chester,
You
and
never,
it's
yeah,
very
it's impossible to like, the thing about that band and him, the legacy, it just gets, the more you go back now and the more you check it out, the more you realize how incredible it was. I mean, Linkin Park, definitely one of the best bands in the last 25 years, I think. And to
I think I
lose
called
their,
them I think I call them the most influential band of the last 25
yeah.
years. There's no band that has much greater influence on where heavy music is right now with its collaboration style, with its blending of genres, and with the willingness to try anything. You're not going to get there if Linkin Park didn't try and do that in the 2000s.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm just going out of order here because I'm pulling some of you because everyone knows about the Jane's Addiction fight on stage. When I saw that on your list, I was like, wow. I saw, there's some really funny videos that people put up and reference that, like those two kissing each other on the lips
Yeah.
on stage. And now Perry Farrell's throwing punches at his guitar player. I'm like, what did you think when you saw that? That was in
At first,
Boston, by the way.
at first, when I saw that, my first thought was, holy crap, rock music is still rolling, baby, because how many times back in the day did we see certain things like this happen? Crazy things happen on stage and the lore that it's created. So it's kind of cool to see some of that stuff happen. And then all of a sudden afterwards, it was like, yep, they're canceling the rest of the tour. There's no more Jane's Addiction. That's the part that kind of sucked the
They'll
most
be
because,
back. Hey, there was a fight between Bobby Dahl and Brett Michaels of Poison on stage. They had a fist fight, and they're going back on tour again. So it can be, they can get through this. Perry was obviously in a bad place. You could tell.
yeah, it's you could tell he was definitely in a bad place because even like when he started throwing at Dave Navarro, you saw Dave, he just looked kind of like he wasn't trying to like fully throw back at him because it was you could tell something else was going on there
He
that
didn't
Dave.
understand it, you know. And then later they explained it was because of the volume on stage. That's an argument that's been going on with bands for years, you know.
Yeah. But it reminded me too when I first saw that of a video. This was back, I can't remember what year it was, but it was Marilyn Manson on stage, and they're opening, starting at the beginning of The Beautiful People, and he was doing something on stage, and he bumped into John Five, and John Five just like lost it, was ready to fight him on stage. And all of a sudden, it was after about like maybe 15 seconds, John Five, he still looks pissed, picks up his guitar and keeps playing, and you could tell Manson knew that he was at fault for it, but it was also why did John Five had that reaction? I can't remember what personal things were happening in his life, but Manson knew about what was going on, and it was like, yeah, I kind of pushed the guy a little too far on that one. That's on me. So I know John Five's playing with Motley Crue right now. Marilyn Manson is still trying to make that comeback. He did perform last year with Slaughter to Prevail, so there's a lot going in Five Finger Death Punch. There's a lot going on there. But again,
Yeah.
it's just a piece that when I saw that, it took me back to that moment where it's like something happened where it might have been a small incident, but there are a lot of other underlying incidents for someone going through a personal side of things that end up just coming to the surface and happening at that moment. So Jane's Addiction definitely could come back based on that, but it might not be for a while.
Yeah, there's you hit it on the nose. There's underlining issues going on within the band. Let me tell you, there are so many bands that they don't speak to each other anymore. They've had like, I mean, it's hard being in a rock band. It really is. Sorry, people are like, oh, it's really hard making a lot of money and playing for. Guess what? You got to spend all your time with the same people. And it's even worse for younger bands when they're in a van driving across
Yeah.
country, you know? I mean, you got to put up with everything that the other people are doing. I don't know. You know, you also have to consider that Jane's Addiction are not young guys.
No, they're not.
Okay. So I don't know what'll happen. Just because Poison was able to get over it doesn't mean they'll get over it, you know?
Mhm.
So we'll see. So what other moments did you really,
Well, let's go to the biggest moment from an international side of things or a worldwide side of things. Who would have thought that on a worldwide stage that metal would be taken into the forefront of the Olympics? And everyone knows what I'm talking about during the Olympic opening ceremonies while performing in a castle, not in a castle, like literally on, in, around a castle was Gojira. Now, a lot of people in the heavy music scene have always seen Gojira as top quality metal music. Like, but in terms of a lot more people getting to know them, it wasn't that big of a thing. They weren't getting their flowers. I remember, and this is an interview I've got coming out in January with none other than Miles Kennedy of Alter Bridge, Miles Kennedy
what?
slash Miles Kennedy, the Conspirators. Yeah,
Good
I got
score. Good score. And I like the way
yeah.
you plugged that, man.
And
I
I
like the way
asked,
you plugged
and I
it.
asked him the three bands thing, and he said, I feel like I can't say this anymore because of the Olympics. But if you would have asked me before that, I would have said Gojira. They absolutely deserve it, but they got their flowers now because of that moment. There were people that were going off on that moment online about the imagery that the opening ceremonies had, and they're saying it was anti-Christian. But no one said anything bad about Gojira or the heaviness, the absolute intensity that they brought, and how it ended up being probably the focal point internationally, pop culture wise, of the opening ceremonies was Gojira's
Yeah,
performance.
you're right.
So this is metal on the world stage once again, but this is not a band that is a legacy band. This is not Slipknot doing it. This is not Metallica doing it. This is Gojira doing it. That was a huge moment for rock and metal fans. It's a huge moment for metal worldwide. And it's going to be something that, especially keeping metal in the mainstream is going to be is going to have a lot of positive reverberations in 2025.
It's really, when you think about it, some of the things we're talking about here, Knock Loose on Jimmy Kimmel, these guys at the Olympics, I mean, this is like really important for the genre. It's really impressive, man. It was quite a year. Um, I'm trying to figure out why the return of Creed made your list.
The return of Creed made the list just because when I thought about it, like it's kind of fun to see the return of Creed on that list as well. But when a band like Creed just ends up coming back out, just people have been kind of waiting for it as a meme type thing. But they came back and they were selling out like arenas that they were going
They
to
have
play. They were selling out
fans.
amphitheaters. They end up doing a like summer in '99 cruise that was headlined by them that sold out almost
They've
instantly.
sold
And
millions. They have million. They have a lot of fans. They've sold millions of records. So I was kind of joking a little bit. I know everyone likes to get on them, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, when Stryper went back on the road, they had the same kind of response. People, if you have fans and you sell a lot of records, you can come back anytime and go out there, and people are going to show up, right?
yeah, and it just ends up not only speaking to just what people like, but also the fact that somewhere embedded in pop culture as well, people still like that rock sound. People still like guitar driven music, even in a world where for the past 15 years, electronic music, EDM, hip hop and rap, pop country, any electronic influences in pop music have been the norm and have been thrown down everybody's throats. And sometimes, you're seeing some of these older bands come back and they're absolutely popping up because people still resonate with that sound. And it gives further inspiration for younger bands to try out certain things with that sound, even some of those more populars, or kids that are just getting into stuff to know that, hey, you don't have to always follow the popular trend of whatever is popular in music, whatever your friends are listening, whatever the popular kids in your school are listening to. You can try it out on your own, and there's going to be an audience there and a family there that you're going to be able to become a part of. All you have to do is just give it a shot. I mean, it's like, oh, where do I find them? Just go to a show, go to a local show, go to a big show in your area. You're going to find people there that like the same music you do because we're all
And
there to see the same kind of music.
And
It's
you
pretty
got to
simple.
you got to credit film and TV a lot for like keeping a lot of the older bands in the limelight still, because when a song all of a sudden comes out and people are like, "What's that?" "Oh, that's from 1978." And they're like, "What?" And fans just reappear and they come out. I am not one of those people that's going to criticize bands for coming out of retirement or touring when they're older. I know a lot of people do. I'm not. I feel like if you got fans and they're going to buy tickets, go and do the gigs. I mean, why not? It's their livelihood. A lot of rock stars, their lives end when they stop touring and recording and they just fade away. And like Neil Young had it right, it's better to burn out than fade away. I mean, why not burn out on the road?
Why not? But again, there's other artists. They have other different, they're people. They have different tendencies. They have different wants, different needs, different personalities. So if you want to fade out, you can fade out. If you want to burn out, go for it. That's up to
Yeah,
you.
I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just sitting defending the fact. I'm defending the fact that I don't care if Creed is back together on the road. I'm not going to get online and criticize him for it. I'm not a fan, but power to him, man. Good for them.
Oh, absolutely good for them. And is there any other moments that are piquing your interest from that list I sent you that you want to talk about?
If you, I don't have the list in front of me anymore, but if you have something else, I mean, why don't you just tell us about, you just gave us a great scoop. Miles Kennedy, that's what I call a top-notch guest. I mean, seriously.
So there's actually a little bit of a funny story behind getting Miles Kennedy on the podcast because that wasn't supposed to technically happen. The original thing was I reached out to the PR person that not only does Miles Kennedy, but I reached out because at the beginning of January, Alter Bridge's guitarist, probably the best guitarist alive right now, Mark Tremonti, is coming out with another solo album
People
from his
love him.
project.
People love him.
And I wanted Mark Tremonti. I still want Mark Tremonti. I reached out to their guy and he said, again, this is like early December. He's like, it doesn't look like it's going to happen until after the album releases because finishing up any last thing with, Tremonti sings Sinatra for Christmas stuff. Then they're doing their end of the year stuff with Creed. And now that we're, recording this on December 31st, the album for Tremonti comes out on January 10th. So he's like, yeah, you're going to be able to do it. But it's probably going to be afterwards. The album comes
Oh,
out.
so
Okay.
would you be interested in doing Miles Kennedy then? I mean,
Yeah. So after that, he says, I got a couple other artists, I'll send you their names. Who do you want to interview? And I'm like, I listened to him, like I gave him the names and he's like, okay, so we can set up, before the holidays and after the holidays. Immediately he sends me this. He's like, also, I just had a cancellation for tomorrow. Do you want to interview Miles Kennedy? And
wow.
I just took in my chair. I'm like, So you're telling me I've got less than 24 hours and I have to do this during the day while I'm supposed to be at work, that I have to figure this out. I've got less than a day to move around my schedule for Miles Kennedy. What
You
time is he
figured it
available?
out.
My first question is after that, like, what time is he available? Because
You
I will
figured it
make
out.
it.
You
Yeah,
know, I
and so I took it and ran with it, and I'm like, I got Miles Kennedy on the podcast. Holy shit!
I had Jackie Fox from the Runaways this year, and that was like so incredible for me to have someone from the Runaway. I mean, I for a long time I was working in Cherie Curry, but she's just
Mhm.
not. She's just crazy, man. I don't care if I'm publicly saying this. The email exchanges I had with her, I just finally gave up because she didn't have a
Fair enough.
publicist. But I reached out directly to Jackie Fox, and she came on the show. So I mean, you can't help but not get excited, Kevin, when you get guests like this. When you just casually mentioned him, I'll like, this is one of the best singers in heavy
Yeah.
rock, I think, period. I mean,
Oh,
Slash
absolutely.
lets him, sing in his band. I mean,
Yeah, so let me ask you this from your perspective, from the artist that you interviewed in 2024, which was probably the artist that, if it was Jackie, that's perfectly fine for that answer too, but which artist was the one that you were like the most shocked that you got to interview, or the one that you were most proud that you got to interview?
Wow, that's a difficult question because you know what? I never judge my interviews by the level of success.
Yeah.
I judge it more like what's a really interesting guest. And I've had so many of them this year. And the interview, the show I put on January 1st of 2024 was The Freeze, and they're like a legendary hardcore band that's been around and is still playing since 1979. So to have those guys on the show was fantastic. Plus, I had Dave Smalley this year too from DYS, Dag Nasty, Down by Law. He's in all those bands, and Roger Miller from Mission of Burma. I've had some really good ones, but I don't know. I guess, not just going by the numbers, but Jackie Fox was a real big score because she told a story about, I don't know if you heard that episodes, but the story she told about getting strangled by a phone cord by Lita Ford was definitely the greatest story anyone ever told on my
Oh my
podcast. And
God.
she hit her over the head with the phone and then strangled her with the phone cord. Two 16-year-old girls in a hotel room having a fight in early in the morning. To me, that story was the greatest story of the year on my podcast.
Okay, I gotta go check out that episode now because I totally missed that one. But my God, I want to hear that story.
Yeah, I mean, she held nothing back. She talked about how her manager and producer raped her. I mean, it's like she didn't hold anything back, man. She was just full on. And, she's a gamer now. She's got Rock Hard 77 as her game that she put out. She's in the game, and it's like she's a fascinating woman, fast
Yeah.
60 something years old. I can't remember exactly, but she's, still cool, man. You can be old and cool. Look at
Yeah,
me.
you can be old and cool. I've had artists on the podcast that have been in their 40s and 50s, and I even had one that was on in their 70s, and you can still be cool and old. It's just age is just a number. Because when I asked that question, I end up looking back at my list. I'm like, were there any artists this year that I had in the podcast that I still look back? I'm like, how the hell did that happen? I mean, I would absolutely say The Warning, because that one I was working for like months to try and put that together, and then I got the message, hey, they can do it like 3 days before the album comes out. You have a half hour. I'm like, alrighty, let's go, let's do this. So I was excited about that one. But there was one that I was looking through. I'm like, this one definitely stands out for me, and it was when I got to interview John Cooper of Skillet.
Yeah, good one.
That that one, oh man, I got the press release for it. I reached out about it, and they're like, yeah, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. We'll see what happens. Now, I'm not as big of I don't listen to Skillet nearly as much as I once did because I've just music taste changed. I like some of the heavier, more metal stuff. But it was something I always wanted to interview him just from, when I started this whole entire thing, he was on the list. I'm sitting in a Waffle House in Kentucky on the day that got rained out for Louder Than Life, and I see an email that says, "Hey, John can do it this day at this time. Do you want it? Now on my phone, and this is where this is even a funnier story too, because I'm on my phone. I'm like, yes, I'll do it. I'll send you the Zoom link and everything. Put the time in there. I'm ready to go. So about 10 days later, I'm expecting the interview to be at 4:30 Central Time because I'm in Milwaukee, so it's Central Time. I sent the email with the time from Zoom when I was in Louisville, Kentucky, which is Eastern Time. So it came forward as Eastern Standard Time, and that's what the schedule was. So the interview was an hour before I was supposed to have it. Okay?
That's happened to me too, man. That has happened to me. That happens a lot. People get confused with the times.
Oh, so I'm at work, and I'm like, I'm about it's an hour before the episode. I've got a half hour left to go, so I'm just messing around and whatnot. About 15 minutes goes by. It's 3:45, and I see an email that John Cooper has joined the Zoom chat. And I'm like, what? I look at the thing, and it started 15 minutes before, and I'm like, oh my I am going to miss this opportunity. But I had my laptop with me. I didn't have the mixer, the microphone, the light, the camera, everything. I had just my laptop speakers, microphone, the laptop
Probably
camera.
sounded great, right?
John sounded fantastic. I didn't sound as good as I normally do, but I'm like, I'm not gonna miss out on this. So I took my computer, I ran somewhere else, opened it up, just had everything good to go, and it was the only episode I shot this year that was not in this area.
Did you
Like
tell him that, the story?
When he popped open, he's like, I'm sorry, I'm 15 minutes late. I'm like, I told him the story, and he just started laughing. He's like, dude, that's way too funny. And we went through the interview, did it fully. But that's not even the weirdest coincidence of time that I had this year. I had a much more insane one that made no sense, but it was too funny. So this would have been back in late September. This is actually right before I went to Louder Than Life. I got a chance to interview one of the guys from the band Make Them Suffer from Australia.
Okay.
And I was excited about this one. Now, they're in Australia, so the time difference is massive. And the time I was supposed to do it was going to be at 10 p.m. Central Time on, I think it was September 24th. Okay? And I'm not happy about having to do it at that time, but I took it because it's a big interview. But I didn't want to, I was a little mad because I had tickets to go see a band called Polaris that night, who's also from Australia. And I really wanted to see them live. Shoot, I'm not going to be able to take it. Well, about a couple days later, with the whole entire, this was before all the crazy events that happened with the band As I Lay Dying, because they released an album in November, and the whole band ended up dissolving pretty much in October. But in September, I did an interview with one of their guitarists, and it was supposed to be at 10 a.m. Central Time on September 24th. So I go home, I get here, I'm all set up to do the interview, and it's 10 a.m. Someone joins the Zoom call, and it's not one of the guys it's not Phil, the former guitarist from As I Lay Dying. It's a guy named Nick. And I'm like, there's a guy named Nick in As I Lay Dying right now, so maybe I got the wrong guy. I go on there, and he starts talking, and it's an Australian accent, and it's nighttime out where he is. I'm like, oh shit. This is Make Them Suffer right now. And it's 1 a.m. there. Why? Just why? And I'm getting nervous because I'm waiting for As I Lay Dying to come in, waiting for Phil to come in at any time. But Phil doesn't join. He's not there. So I'm like, I'm just going to do some Make Them Suffer because he's here right now. I got this rolling. We're just going to roll with it.
Wow, that's incredible, man.
We did the episode for an hour. It was a fantastic episode. I got done with it. And immediately when I get done with it, I'm saving everything. My work computer, my boss calls. I'm right about to answer, and it's 11 a.m., and I look at the Zoom things. I still had it open. Phil from As I Lay Dying joins the call. I'm like, what? So I ended the call with my boss. I'm like, I'm not talking to you right now. I start the call with Phil, and he says, hey, man, I'm sorry I'm an hour late. I traveled to Nashville last night, and I thought it was, 11 o'clock, and it's 11 Eastern, not 11 Central. And I said, dude, you do not know the funniest coincidence that just happened.
That's crazy.
I never aired that episode because it was supposed to come out right before the album released, but with the band essentially dissolving and it's not necessarily the best of terms, the episode no longer exists. It's like it just doesn't exist anymore because nothing of that needed to be put out there. but I didn't want to paint Phil in a bad light or anything. So I was like, I can't put that out there. But the whole story about how that whole day turned out, and then I still got to go see Polaris that night. I showed up at the show. All my friends knew what would knew that I was not supposed to be there. But when I showed up, everyone freaked out and they were like, "What happened?" I'm like, funny story. That.
Hey Kevin, it's always a pleasure talking to you, man. And you always turn me on to new bands and new music, and I really appreciate that more than anything. So keep doing the great job, and I'm excited about Miles Kennedy. I can't wait for that. And I'm sure we'll talk again.
We will, but I got one more question for you before we wrap this
Of
up. And
course
no,
you
it's not
do.
the one I normally ask, but
Of
I'll just
course
ask
you
you
do.
something
You're
different.
such an interviewer. You can't be interviewed. You got to do the interview.
I got to do it. I got to do it. Even when even if I ever like applied for a job and they are like, okay, we're gonna interview you, I'm like, no, 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 I'm gonna end up turning this around in like 2 minutes anyway. Trust
Don't
me.
make it too hard of a question now.
So yeah, I mean, you love music. You're all into this. We're going into 2025. What's one thing you think that's gonna happen in music in 2025? What do you think is one? Make a prediction. Like that's
Ooh.
essentially what I'm going for. Make a prediction for music in 2025. I want to. We can come back at the end of
Prediction.
2025 and see if we were right.
Well, I mean, the vinyl, for me to predict vinyl is going to be bigger would be like, well, no kidding. It's been getting bigger every year. But I actually see more record stores and more vinyl sales and more people are into cassettes again. And I even think, and here's my surprise, I think CDs are also going to end up becoming popular again because people are really, whenever there's tricky times in the history of American politics, like we have a very tricky time coming up right now, things happen. Like I remember the Reagan years, man. That's when hardcore exploded, and then you'd every flyer you'd see would have Ronnie Reagan's face on it. I have a feeling we're gonna that and sales are just gonna go. I mean, maybe that's not that bold of a prediction, but that's what I think is going to happen. I can't really think of something. I can't get any bolder than that. What you're doing though is convincing me that metal has become more and more popular, but it has been popular. But when you see more or less mainstream hardcore metal bands get into the mainstream, I love that. I love it.
Oh, absolutely. I love the take that you had too with seeing more physical media of music exploding, and I hope we see it too. I
You
really do.
worded it better than I worded it. That's what I'm trying to say. Fuck this digital world we live
Yeah.
in. I like getting an album. I've got a tons of records. I love looking at the album and the artwork and reading the lyrics and everything, man. That's what it's all about for me. So the more that happens, I just bought two records yesterday and it was ridiculous. One's a compilation of garage bands from Wisconsin, actually, from the 60s. And the other one is an R&B unknown classics. And I didn't know any of the songs, but I listened to the record. I was like, this is great. Of course, those were in a used bin. I got those, but I
Yeah.
buy mostly used records, but I'll get some new ones here and there. But I think that's a problem. They're overpriced right now. And that's why Taylor Swift has been able to saturate the market
Yep.
because if you're saying, well, who sold the more records? Well, all the $40 versions of every Taylor Swift record sold out, and there you
Yep.
go. All right, Kevin, I got to get ready for the new year.
Alrighty, get ready for the new year. I got to get ready for 2025 too. I have a list of like all the bands that are coming out with albums that I want to interview. They're not small. I'll put it this way. They're not small bands and got to go big or go home, right?
Yeah, you're doing well, man. Just keep it up, man. Keep it up.
Hey,
And
we did well in 2024. Let's do better in 2025.
thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Rico.
All right.
Absolutely a pleasure and I'll see you later.
All righty.